Yeah, fingers crossed. You're right. Okay. 7:01. Great. I think we can get started. All righty. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Phoenixville Public Library's semi-annual open mic night for writers, our showcase of local writing talent. When we had our last virtual open mic night back in April, who would have thought that 6 months later we'd have to do it in that format again? But so glad to see everybody tonight. And even though it really can't substitute for face-to-face presentation, I'm thankful we do have things like Zoom to keep us connected. So tonight we are pleased to present 15 local authors who will be reading from their works. Some of the authors are published, and so I've also asked them to share information on how readers can purchase their books. Each author has up to 5 minutes to present, and yes, Evan, our host, will be timing everyone to keep things moving along. Authors, please make sure I can find you easily, if your name matches or is in some way, shape, or form close to the name that you've given me. Let's see. Oh, after each reading, feel free to applaud the reader using the reactions feature in Zoom. Look like if you have the Zoom's latest update, they've added a couple of new reactions. They're getting a lot of emoji looking things in there now. At the end of the night, you may unmute yourself to make a comment or ask a question. We are recording tonight's program for presentation on the library's YouTube channel, we hope. Hope we're recording it. And with that now, we invite you to relax, enjoy the program, and thank you, writers. And now I turn things over to Evan Harbaugh. Evan leads our fiction writers group here at the library. So Evan, go ahead and unmute yourself.
How long are we giving each person, Mark?
5 minutes.
Is it 5? Okay.
Yep.
Just want to make sure. Okay. So my name is Evan Harbaugh. I am the leader of the Phoenix Fiction Writers Group, a club that's part of the Phoenixville Library system. Let's see, a little bit about me. I'm a mental health therapist who focuses on clients who struggle with or question their sexual orientation or gender identity. I write across genres, and I lead, as I said before, the semi-monthly Phoenix Fiction Writers. Later this month, I will be giving a presentation about the intersection between creative writing and the LGBTQ+ community to the mainline writers group. Okay, so I'm going to go first. This is the latter half of the first chapter of something I've been working on. And just to understand this this section, I'm just going to have a 2 or 3 sentence recap of what happened in the first part of this chapter. Valentine, an awkward high school senior, had an awful day at school so far. His friend Laura just melted down because Laura just got the news of her rejection from each first pick college. Valentine comforted Laura. Laura laughed. Thank you, Valentine. Laura stood. See you at the GSA? Count on it. He smiled at Laura. Connecting back up with Dustin, they had to jog to their next class, without even a moment to spare to stop at their lockers for their books. Dustin took the last left on the English wing while Valentine continued to the science labs. Valentine was so late for his biology class, an advanced placement class, no less. Mrs. Leighton wrote him a detention slip. Leighton was a tough but fair teacher, and she was big into rules and order. She handed him the slip. Looking at it, he sighed and said to her, "Please, Mrs. Leighton, I have a club after school. I can't go to detention today." "You should have thought about that before being tardy to my class, Mr. Romero." She stared at him for a few moments, walked to the front of the room, and removed her glasses. Can anyone define taxes for me?" Valentine's last class was U.S. History 2, and Mr. Bellows tended to drone on and on about the Cold War. Fully tenured and unionized, didn't have much to worry about sticking to the curricula or his job in general. And since Valentine had heard the economics teacher does nothing while his classes play Monopoly all day, regardless, Bellows simply saw everything that happened in the 20th century can be related back to Soviet Russia and the Cold War, and therefore impacted the history of modern and postmodern U.S. history. Vice Principal Martin held detention beginning 20 minutes after the last bell. Valentine found himself in with mostly minor rule breakers. There was a girl named Alyssa Burke who was clearly incited for breaking the dress code, as evidenced by her halter top with spaghetti straps and short shorts, less fabric than some men's wallets. The other two boys who were in all remedial classes, and judging by their matching shiners, may have gotten into a scrape. I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, Alyssa said. I don't have any homework. I did it all at study hall. Then read a book, said Mr. Martin. I don't have a book, she said, not even a textbook. Then write something, anything. Alyssa opened her mouth. Mr. Martin said, and if you don't have any paper, you can sit quietly. Alyssa rolled her eyes, and a few seconds later, once Mr. Martin averted his eyes, pulled out a copy of 50 Shades from her bag. Valentine put his head down. No sleeping. Valentine almost said, I'm not sleeping, I'm decompressing, but instead he said, yes, sir, and lifted his head off the unyielding surface of the desk. Valentine went to his locker to dump his books for the weekend and went outside to catch the late bus. The ham and cheddar hot pocket dinner he ate burned his tongue like it usually did. When he texted Dustin about getting together tomorrow, Saturday, he didn't respond immediately, filling time by listening to the brief heavy downpour outside. His dad called around 9. Did you get the promotion? Asked Valentine. They didn't tell me right away. His dad told him. I think I'm definitely in the running. It's been me and one other person. Valentine must have been quiet because his dad asked, how was your day? I got detention for being late for class, he said, and no one asked me out to the dance. Well, said his dad, it helps to do some asking as well. It's okay, said Valentine. Don't wait up for us, his dad said. We'll be home at 11. Changing for bed, he checked his pockets for loose items. He pulled out the pin and placed it on the nightstand. Still no response from Dustin, so he laid in bed and thought of his day. He wished himself a happy Valentine's Day. With his hand on the bedside table, he turned off the light and he looked at his ceiling. I wish I could have had one real Valentine this year, and he drifted off to sleep. Valentine! His eyes flashed open suddenly as his mom called for breakfast. He glanced up at his iPod's dock. It read 7 a.m. on Friday, February 14th. Valentine remembered, jumped out of his bed and threw on his socks. Wait, isn't it Saturday today? He asked himself. He looked at his phone and also read Friday, February 14th. Oh God, dear God. Could it be Valentine's Day again? I didn't realize. What you have to understand about that, though, is that the day he's in, when at the start of this segment, is also Valentine's Day. So I didn't realize that was lacking, but yes. So it has a story that then goes with him reliving the same day over and over again, and it happens on Valentine's Day. So sorry about that. Okay, who is first on the list? Christopher Alden. Christopher Alden is a retired Coast Guard veteran who resides in Philadelphia area and now writes short stories, often focusing on flash and microfiction. Originally from Detroit, he earned his BA in English from the University of Michigan. He serves on the board of the Brandywine Valley Writers Group and moderates critique sessions, the Mainland Writers Group. He also writes a blog on his Facebook page called Friday Food Porn. You can track him on Twitter at Alden's Thoughts or on Instagram at Christopher Alden Writes. Okay.
Thank you, Evan.
Sure.
This piece is called War and Peas. Dear Mom, Do you remember my contentious and adversarial childhood relationship with your boiled peas? There was no instrumental, emotional event when a like for peas turned on its head and became a bitter thing. If such an event had occurred, your repeated, resolute recounting of the story would be another shard in my memory, another small, indelible stain in our skirmish history. Maybe our clashes were preordained, our lines drawn already in hardening sand. Our battle of wills started early on when I was a secure prisoner in the high chair next to you. The first time you broke out the Gerber's strained peas, I protested violently, as only babies can, howling and crying. I repeatedly refused your insistent spoon with a swipe of my hand and snapping head twist. You showed me that smiling baby on the jar, and even though all foods Gerber was supposed to please, I consider that smiling baby an idiot for liking strained peas. I wasn't going to like them, no matter how much cooing, coaxing, and pressure you employed. By the time we had had our fill, green goop was everywhere, flung in the far corners of your perfect June Cleaver kitchen. Did you fear future dinner time struggles with the kids planned after me? Or did you simply ascribe it all to an unpleasant behavioral phase? Our battles waged during the advancing years. Do you remember the family dinners when I flat out refused to eat your orderly calendar planned serving of canned peas? If Dad liked them, I had to like them. My brothers and sisters ate all their food. Why couldn't I be a good kid like them? They ate as directed. They weren't picky food wasters. They were conscious of the world's starving children. They were grateful for all the food on their plates. I tried various methods to get them down my gullet, swallowing them whole, one gag-inducing pea at a time, like pre-breakfast Flintstone vitamins, smashing them into dull, compact paste and dumping too much salt on them, mixing them with other foods on my plate. But this only served to taint my whole dinner. After a few aborted attempts, I simply sat there with those wrinkled little green marbles, cold, shrunken, and alone, staring at nothing, retreating into my world, enjoying my hatred. Eating them meant I could have dessert or watch television with the rest of the family. Eating them meant inclusion, but also capitulation. Alone in the kitchen, the living room laugh track sitcoms tugging at my stalemated mind and feeding my childhood hatred, I fantasized we owned a dog, a big one, like a German Shepherd or a St. Bernard. I named him Max, and I took him to school for show and tell. All the kids admired us. He was my thick and thin companion, sleeping on the foot of my bed every night. If we had had such a dog, I am sure he would help me finish my peas. But we never got a dog. In the end, I simply sat there, waiting you out. How many times did you send me to bed hungry or without dessert? Because the contest of our wills was not something we gave up on easily. It's been 10 long years since cancer took you away, and decades since our conflicts, our impasses. Does it matter who won those battles? Who won those wars? I regret we never had a real truce, any real heart-to-heart. I'm sorry that I didn't know how to say I was sorry, that I didn't acknowledge the pain I caused you. I know you always intended to nourish me, but you only nourished my rebellious nature. Things are different now. I can't put a finger on when I began accepting peas on my plate and then actually liking them. I suppose it started with a small tolerance which gradually blossomed into a preference. My girlfriend cooks fresh peas once in a while, usually with mushrooms, a little salt, and some butter. I have a big dog named Ringo, but he won't eat them. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Jane Dugdale.
Evan, we can't see you very well.
Okay, sorry. Our next speaker is Jane Dugdale, who moved to Phoenixville Borough in the spring of 2019 after living in Charlestown for a few years and in Radnor Township for 30 years. In 2006, she retired from teaching English to speakers of other languages in Radnor Township. She received her original training for that role as a Peace Corps volunteer in Chile in the 1960s. She now works with the transition movement, building local community resilience to what she calls system collapse. She enjoys writing for the Transition Resilience Report at www.pat.community, sometimes sharing her poetry there. She's had a great summer gardening, both at her home on Morgan Street and at community gardens in the borough. Please welcome Jane.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Evan. I have 4 short poems that I've written since the last, I've written 3 of them since the last open mic. The first one is called Ordinary Birds. I wrote it May 22nd, 2020. Starlings may be bothersome to some, but I've enjoyed watching them come and gather straw from the flower beds, stuffing their mouths and then flying off over the housetops to some nest of theirs. They've come a couple of times, so the nest must be ready by now. Blue jays just call like crows, not a pretty sound, but yesterday one was positively excited, flying from the rose trellis to the bird feeder, back and forth and cawing over and over. I thought he must be trying to let his little ones know there's food here, lots of food, and the feeder is too slippery for me, but you'll fit. But no one ever came, and after a while he left. And then there are the doves, the lovey-dovey doves, cooing in their pairs, following each other along the ground and on the branches, hiding away to do their thing. It's all very ordinary, I know, but so special to be part of. My second poem is called Ordinary Birds 2, and I wrote this in June of this year. Today it was 2 robins that I caught sunbathing in the backyard. One was content to throw out his chest and then sink down in slumber. I'm quite sure he closed his eyes. The other was multitasking, opening and closing her wings to catch the rays and grooming herself in the meantime. She hardly could stay still, and she soon wandered off into the shade. When a cloud passed, he woke up, found a treat in the grass, and then followed her into the shady spot. Of course, I don't know that he was a he and she was a she. They could have been sisters, brothers, same-sex partners, who knows? I've heard such things happen in nature. This third poem is called Dis-ease. I wrote it in July of 2020. It's not just the discomfort of the mask or the disability to be hospitable or the disallowance of hugging. It's the vision of children hungry, parents unable to feed them, mayors unable to protect them, police unable to control themselves, senators unable to access a conscience, a president unable to be a good citizen. And then there's the future. There's the heat around us that reminds us of the heat to come. The happy sight of a butterfly that makes us wonder if we'll see it again next year. The next 6 months and the looming election chaos. The schools, the teachers, and the kids not knowing. Gratitude is all very well. Yes, I'm fine. I have things worked out. Curbside pickup for the necessaries, Zoom for connection, friends and family checking in. It's the hole in the heart. Isn't there a disease of that nature? And the last one is called Goldenrod at Equinox. And I wrote this in September, but a couple of years ago. Along the roads where nature rules and poison hasn't browned the verge, or mowers haven't tamed the grass, there's goldenrod. The yellow heads point up or lean ajar, and some particularly fortunate field has turned itself over to the yellow tassels. We used to fear the blossoms, saying they are the cause of allergies. Thank goodness someone let us know that ragweed is the culprit there, not goldenrod. Let goldenrod reign, a scepter granting passage into fall. That's all.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, our next reader is Lena Fay, who was born in St. Petersburg, Russia. She started reading very early. By the age of 8, she had read all of the Sherlock Holmes stories and many others. She became interested in literature and writing by middle school. Lena graduated from the Academy of Pharmaceutical Sciences in St. Petersburg, Russia, with a master's degree in chemical engineering, concentrating in biotechnology. She left the former USSR in 1989 as a 23-year-old refugee, finally arriving in Philadelphia. She has been writing life stories in a traditional Jewish storytelling style with a humor through tears approach. Her stories are a reflection of her crazy life as a professional scientist, a genetic engineer, and a single parent of 2 teenagers. Lena has been writing poetry in both Russian and English since 2017 and has presented at Russian cultural festivals and charity events. Her poetry, at times sarcastic and autobiographical, also reflects political events and injustice around the world. She's also an educator and aspiring artist. Please welcome Lena.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, well,
we can hear you.
I have some issues with my computer, so you cannot see me, but you can hear me. But then I'll appear in the phone, but I think the phone is not the best reception. So I will read you a couple poems in English. I do actually write in Russian and in English, but I have not translated everything. And I also would like to read in Russian too, the same thing. So just so you hear the voice in Russian, so to see how it's coming in a different language, because the poetry, as you probably know, does change when you translate it into different language, and it's become another poem. So I'm not sure if I'm really very good in English, but I try, and I'm actually working on it to kind of so fine tune it. My daughter have been my copywriter, or someone who's trying to, well, she did really great with a couple of my poems to review the language and find some of the details that perhaps I was missing. So the first one is the letter. It's a poem to my daughter, and I found it's easy to communicate in a way of poems, which I've been doing actually for a couple of years now. I started writing 2 years ago the poetry, or 2.5 years ago, poetry, because my best friend lost her mom, and I knew them for over 30 years, and we've been friends, and that's kind of drove me into writing poetry. I haven't been writing for a while. I did write when I was in high school and then in college, and then I was so busy with my life. So the letter, or let me say that I'll read it in English and then I'll read it in Russian, right? So to be fair, that the first language for everybody except myself is English. With my thoughts I'm writing to you. Perhaps let's start in the morning. I will continue through the midday and finish by midnight. Too many words. They look like stars above the peak at night. I wanted to speak, but you will not hear my bitterness. I am sending my poems written on a leaf. I am painting on a canvas with a splash. There are restless sounds of a guitar. My aspirations I avoid. My conversation is only with myself, but my thoughts are to a full moon. And the stars are whispering my thoughts to you as murmurs on the wings of the sounds. We don't know how to talk to each other, but only sharing our pain. The thoughts and words are wounding us like needles. I'm trusting line paper, a breeze carrying our words like a pieces of a broken mirror. My dearest, let's be silent together. In the distance, we're giving love to each other. We're passing waves, warmth of the heart. In time, we will assemble this puzzle. So I'll read you in Russian now. And I'm sure probably some of the words maybe not the best one in English. So letter, which is in Russian письмо. Я мысленно пишу тебе письмо. Начну, пожалуй, поутру, продолжу в полдень, закончу в полночь. Слова скопились, словно звезды на яру. Сказать хочу, нет, не услышишь горечь. Я шлю поэмы на листке, рисую всплеском на холсте. Гитара звуки в суете, мое стремление в пустоте. Мой разговор с самим собой, а мысли с полной луной, и звезды шепотом с тобой, на крыльях шорохов волной. Мы не умеем говорить вдвоем, а только боль свою передаем. Слова и мысли ранят, как иголки, по этому бумажному листку. Я доверяю, словно ветерку, нести слова, как зеркало осколки. Давай, родная, помолчим вдвоем. На расстоянии любовь мы отдаем. Передаем сердец волну и теплоту. Когда-нибудь мы соберем осколки. The other one is kind of, I'm sorry for the sad ones. I mean, the other one was actually, it came as a screaming of my heart because my best girlfriend lost her mom. And just a year ago, almost a year ago, in June 19, 2019 in Livingston, and I just couldn't, I mean, I just had to say something. And it came as a poem which is dedicated to everyone who lost their mothers. And, you know, it was very interesting because I've got so many friends calling me and saying, Yelena, did something happen to your mom? Did you lose your mom? And no, I didn't lose my mom, but I guess it was such a powerful poem that everybody thought that I'm writing about my mom. So I dedicated it to everyone who lost their mothers, and here it is. To all who lost their mothers, I don't know what to say. How can I console you in this tragedy? There's no pain like the pain of losing of your own mother. In my dreams, I'm calling you. In my dreams only, you're coming, my mother. But when I'm awake, the life is passing by. But you're not, you are leaving me. My pain is like a bitter lump. But I'm not ready to say goodbye to you. Somewhat quietly whispers, the time is healing and the years are rushing away. You are always with me, my mother. You are my angel and my savior. You are like a little eternal light, like a shelter for my memory. Well, I don't know. How does that sound in Russian? Are you actually, do you like to hear the poem in Russian? Like, I don't know, like I am always interested to hear it in the language of the original language, but I don't know how you guys are.
That's okay. We're running out of time.
Okay, so I'll skip the Russian then.
Okay,
Thank you very much for listening.
you're very welcome. Okay, so our next person is Greg Fox. Recently retired after teaching creative writing at Phoenixville Middle School for the past 20 years and feels like he dodged a bullet. He has been building a collection of short stories and vignettes about growing up Catholic in post-World War II Philadelphia, titled Fathers, Sons, and Ghosts. He has no ambitions about being published. His stories are written solely for posterity.
Am I ready? These are just some thoughts I had about trying to adjust to retirement. I finally rolled out of bed at 8:39 this morning, longest I allowed myself to sleep since retiring just 4 months ago. I stayed up late watching a documentary about Gordon Lightfoot. He was one of my heroes during my college years. I didn't realize he was still alive. He is 81 years old now, and he looks terrible. Nothing like the handsome curly-haired stud muffin I remember sitting cross-legged next to his 12-string guitar in the cover of his Sundown album. During his recording career, Gordon penned more hit songs about breakups than Taylor Swift. He's very important to me during my early 20s before I met my wife. Every single day at 4 a.m., my iPhone wakes me to Philip Glass, then again at 5 a.m. to Scarlet Begonias. If I'm still lying there at 6 a.m., a merciless Hendrix guitar solo reminds me that I need to put out the recycling and fill the bird feeders. Waking before sunrise means the world belongs to me. I can sit in the bathroom uninterrupted for an hour if I want to, listening to the BBC while scribbling an impossible to-do list that includes very little wiggle room for eating or sleep. I drink my coffee black with an ice cube, have not touched any dairy in 5 years. Black coffee tastes like liquid crap. I might grab a Cliff Bar from the pantry, but I usually eat nothing until after my daily workout. Often I forget about breakfast altogether. Sometimes my first calories of the day come in the form of a cold beer around 11 a.m. Passing my adult son on his way out the door, he will often shake his head and remind me I need to learn how to relax. Plenty of time for that when I'm dead, I tell him. One morning, I sat on my front step watching the teachers stream into the parking lot of the middle school across the street from my house. Better you than me, I shouted to any car with an open window, but I felt their pain as they jockeyed for parking spots and struggled with backpacks and shoulder bags full of manuals and test papers. But once they all disappeared into the school, a sense of loneliness fell over me like a heavy blanket. It was as if there was a party somewhere and no one thought about inviting me. I often see my 72-year-old neighbor Tom smoking his pipe on his front porch while scrolling through his iPad. The conversation almost always begins the same way. Top of the morning to you, Thomas. Is it bureau o'clock yet? He replies. Then I feel obliged to present him with an itinerary of my chores for the day, which often include yard work, painting, and running errands for my wife while she is busy screaming at her students on Zoom. I have nothing to do and all day to do it, Tom mutters, as if boasting. Tom is a Vietnam veteran and listens to much of the same music I do. This morning I walked over to him to tell him about the Gordon Lightfoot documentary, and I mentioned how bad I thought Gordon looked, considering he was once such a handsome-looking fellow. Tom looked up from his iPad long enough to pull his pipe out of his mouth and chuckle. Hey, at one time we all were, he says. Since retiring, I bought almost every big boy toy I've been coveting for the past few years, including a MacBook Pro, a MIG welder, a 65-inch TV, various power tools, a Martin guitar, and a GoPro camera. But I'm still not sure if my new Apple iWatch 6 can do much more for me than my $40 Timex. I like that I can talk to my wife Dick Tracy style while riding my bike through Valley Forge or rollerblading along Kelly Drive. And monitoring my heart rate during exercise is about as interesting as it is useful. But I have resisted activating certain health-related features that measure things like blood oxygen levels and irregular heart rhythms, so that I can check myself into the nearest hospital at the slightest variance from what is considered normal. That's as good as telling me I'm about to die. I don't fear death, never did, but I do fear living a life not lived. The most important lesson Carlos Castaneda learned during his sorcerer's apprenticeship with Don Juan was how to restructure his life by knowing his own death. Well, I have seen my own death, and I don't need an Apple Watch to let me know when it's going to happen. But I think I know how it's going to happen. One day I'll be sitting on my front step reading news stories on my iPhone when one of my neighbors will walk up to me and ask me what my plans are for that day. I will put down my phone just long enough to look up and say, I have nothing to do and the rest of my life to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Greg. Next is, let's see here, Jane Kelly, who is a native of Philadelphia, close to the Jersey Shore settings of her Meg Daniels Mysteries, available from Plexus Publishing. Jane is also the author of Widow Lady Mysteries and the Writing in Time Mysteries, available from Kindle only. She is the immediate past president of the Delaware Valley chapter of Sisters in Crime and serves on the board of the New York chapter of Mystery Writers of America. Her most recent Meg Daniels novel, Greetings from Ventnor City, debuted in January. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm going to read today from a book called Widow Lady, which is one that I published independently, and it's just come out in paperback. Edna Bartlett came to call on a Sunday. I hated Sundays, especially hot summer Sundays, and the day Mrs. Bartlett visited was one of the warmest that year. Granted, 1960 broke no heat records in Philadelphia. No television broadcasts of reporters frying eggs on the sidewalk. No newspaper photos of kids cooling off in the fire plug spray. But back in the era when Pennsylvania blue laws kept the stores closed and dinner with grandma kept the kids inside, the stillness of a Sunday afternoon made the heat feel oppressive. The quiet allowed the sound of knuckles rapping on the aluminum screen door to travel easily to the garden at the side of my house. If I had realized who was knocking, I never would have called, I'm out here. But I didn't, so I did. A few seconds later, Mrs. Bartlett, wrapped in a navy blue dress and dark tan hose, appeared at the top of the cement steps to my yard. The sight of her Sunday clothes made the air feel 10 degrees warmer. Mrs. Bartlett waited until she reached the bottom of the stairs to speak. Her tight-lipped style of speech matched her restrained demeanor. Mrs. Kane, I thought I would stop on my way home from church. I know that sounds like a harmless statement. It wasn't. There was tone and subtext. What she really said was, I knew you would be here, not a church where all upstanding individuals spend Sunday morning. She surveyed my attire with a sneer that added that she did not find Bermuda shorts and a sleeveless blouse suitable Sunday best. I pretended not to notice. I didn't ask why, after living across the street from me for 9 years, my neighbor decided to drop by for the first time. I'd been raised to believe prying was impolite and a lady was always polite. At the time, it never occurred to me to be anything but a lady. So I gestured at the metal lawn chair across from me and offered Mrs. Bartlett a drink. We mid-century American hostesses didn't have a wide array of summer beverages to offer. Lemonade, iced tea, soda. I had lemonade and of course tap water, to most people at the time, the only kind. No, thank you. I best get home to my boys. I sent them on ahead with Mr. Bartlett. Her expression, a perfect mixture of decorum and condescension, reminded me that she felt she was superior party. I didn't agree with superior, but she was definitely senior. I wasn't exactly sure how senior. Most women named Edna were at least 20 years ahead of me in life, as were the Mildreds, the Ethels, and the Mabels. The Kathys, Susies, and Patties were the ones who on most days poured into the driveway behind my house to play. There were no Madisons, Kayleys, or even Kendras yet. I hailed from the Helen, Betty, and Margaret generation, although my parents had chosen to give me the rather plain, or as they called it, classic, name of Catherine. Mrs. Bartlett didn't use it. Mrs. Kane, a thought occurred to me as I prayed. She delivered her words with an unexpected solemnity. I know I can tell you this because you are a very private woman. So that was my reputation? The truth, I wasn't discreet. I simply wasn't home during the prime gossip hours. While the other women on the block were hanging wash and exchanging gossip over their back fences, I was catching the C-bus to my office downtown. While they were watching their children play and chatting, I was taking dictation and typing legal briefs. While they were pushing shopping carts around the Penn Fruit and making conversation, I was waiting alone at the Greek deli to purchase a beverage to go with the sandwich I carried from home to eat at my desk. I wasn't so much private as isolated. I have heard you work as an investigator, Mrs. Bartlett again used her tone to communicate disapproval, this time for my alleged occupation. Well, some of the tasks I perform could be called investigative. The attorney I work for sometimes asks me to run errands. Those jobs usually involve trying to expose a misbehaving husband, an unscrupulous witness, or a dishonest juror. Sometimes they involve getting us dry cleaning. I'm a secretary. Yes, but Mr. Bartlett told me you do special projects. I knew where her husband got that information, the Tyler's Christmas party 2 years ago. I'd had a martini. Actually, I'd had several martinis. One might say I came out of my shell and for a few hours became the person I used to be, the cheerful young woman I was before Tom didn't come back from Korea, the girl whose father cautioned, no man will marry a girl who is funnier than he is. That's it, thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, our next reader is Lanny Larcinese. Is that the correct pronunciation? Has been writing fiction and nonfiction for the past 8 years. His early short stories were successive first prize winners at the 3 Philadelphia Writers' Conferences. He has authored a memoir, Women, One Man's Journey, and 2 crime novels, I Detest All My Sins and Death in the Family, the latter of which was released on January 1st of this year. His latest, Fire in the Belly, a story modeled on the 1985 bombing of a row house in Philadelphia by the Philadelphia Police Department, will be released during 2021. Lanny appears tonight under the auspices of Crime Writers Caravan, an authors collective. Go ahead, Lanny.
Okay, am I unmuted, everybody? Yes, I am. This piece is from my latest novel, Death in a Family, was released January 1 of this year, available at Amazon and your friendly bookstores. And anybody averse to a little bit of earthy language, now's your chance to bail out. Bill and I arrived at Alberto's Ristorante. Primo Catone sat alone, his men outside. So what are we going to do, the capo asked, sipping anisette. I'll trade the site for 10% of the deal, I said. What deal? Even if there was a deal, there ain't going to be any 10%. Rosie's Diner is the Keystone parcel, and I own it, Primo. But something can soften me up. Tell me, who killed my father? Yeah, well, either way, 10% ain't going to happen, he said, sparks practically shooting from his eyes. Over a few acres in Bensalem. I added, the license will be wired. He jacked an eyebrow. Oh, yeah? License for what? There you go again, Mr. Catone, asking for concessions, but no offers. How's this for an offer? Juji Gaetano. It spilled right out. He killed your father, cut off his hands. Did it in the basement of the club. Scorching bile shot into my throat. I finally said, this is a thing I must take care of. We'll have to postpone these talks. I'm sure you understand. You know how to reach me, he said with barely controlled impatience. Don't waste my time. He slid out of his chair and ambled toward the door like a lazy lion. He turned and said, ciao bello, and make it soon. Walking back toward my apartment, my friend Bill said, education and smart aren't always the same. You're educated, he's smart. We're talking about the fucking mob here, Donnie. I mean, come on. I tell Juji day and night. On Thursdays, He drove to his beach house in Margate with its ocean views, teak deck, and 10,000 fazools worth of outdoor cooking equipment. Guys like Gaetano, they kill for the money, then bask in oceanfront homes with downtown girlfriends who suck their dicks, while drones like my dad trade their souls in servitude and dare to dream of a humble trailer next to a pleasant pond. The woman at the beach house was a girlfriend. Her powder blue Beamer was always there. She was a tall, pretty blonde who carried herself proud of her 5'10" or so. Their time together was mostly sedate, off island to see a movie or dinner and TV. On those nights, I would watch from across the street as the television's flickering lights bounced off the evening mist or starlit sky until it went dark, sometimes as early as 11 p.m., and seethe that mother agonized over what to cook for dad, while these two coke-fucked and leaked ludicrous stains on Manito's silk sheets. On Sundays, they often went to Ocean City, where they would meet up with two small children at the Hideaway Cove amusement park. The kids would emerge from a bronze Mercedes driven by a black guy and run to the blonde, and she would hug them and make a fuss. Juji would nurse a cigar and stay by his loading green Cadillac, the color of money, while she took the kids on rides and fed them pizza and cotton candy before dropping them back at the Mercedes. On my forays to and from the shore, I scanned the scrub pine forest on either side of the AC Expressway, pulling off the road in spots to examine trees more closely, peering into the woods to see if a fence was close to the road or the trees extended uninterrupted well back. I wondered if I could dig a grave there, even a shallow one, so the animals could sniff out the body and eat it, or whether the tree roots made it impossible, or whether the sandy soil made it easy for the son of a bitch to rot. And what were the odds of a trooper pulling up behind my car on the shoulder, getting out to inspect, running the tag when he saw my car empty? I saw myself spotting him and emerging from the trees as if I had to pee. I'd go back later, retrieve the body and bury it somewhere else, maybe alongside the turnpike between Philly and Harrisburg or down in Delaware. Maybe I should chop off his arms and legs, but I need a place to butcher him, plus there was the blood problem. Too risky. I'd get somebody else to do it. I called Primo from Atlantic City. I haven't forgotten our sit down, I said, but you know, I have to take care of that thing. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Lonnie. So next we have Debra Ludwig, who lives in Doylestown, PA with her husband and daughter. She is a former journalist and recipient of the Keystone Press Award for coverage of the 1991 plane crash of Senator John Hines. Currently, she is writing a book called The Goodbye Gift. It's about finding the gratitude in one's grief, which can help in the healing process, how she did and how she hopes others can do too. She's hoping to give others a different perspective, a positive outlook on a very somber event in their lives. Welcome, Debra.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mark. This was a very last minute thing. I just came to see my talented friend Donna read, and then suddenly Mark mentioned he had a spot and he offered it to me, so here I am. I'm extremely terrified and nervous, so thank you all. And I am writing this book, and to that end, I wrote a short piece, and recently it's been published in a few area newspapers. So this is basically the piece that recently has been published. Thank you. The Goodbye Gift: How the act of gratitude can help in the grieving process and in your everyday life. One of my personal mottos has always been, life is a gift, treat it as such. I've always made it a point to show gratitude to the people and even the objects around me. I strongly feel that the connection among all beings is one of the most satisfying aspects of this life, and it all starts with gratitude. Having gratitude in the arena of life is pretty common and something I knew about myself. What I didn't know is that I could have gratitude in the arena of death. I've had 4 separate experiences with loved ones saying goodbye to me as they were crossing over from this life into the next. Each one was an absolute gift to me. I often wonder if my openness and ever-present feeling of gratitude helped me see the messages they were sending me when they were leaving this life and heading into the next. These gifts gave me a profound sense of comfort during my grief and helped me through the healing process. I feel that my attitude toward gratitude is part of why I was given these goodbye gifts, because I would appreciate them. But I'm certainly not a lone recipient. I believe anyone who practices the act of gratitude on a daily basis will be amazed at what they may receive in return. The first time I had an experience with someone saying goodbye to me as they passed away, I thought I was reading too much into what I saw or that it was an anomaly. My mom's brother, Joe, and his wife, Lucy, lived about 20 minutes from us growing up. I was their goddaughter and basically the child they never had. Our bond was strong. My aunt passed away after a brief illness in 1993. Then, 2 years later, an unexpected fall landed my Uncle Joey in the hospital in a coma. Each evening, I would drive the hour to sit with him. He was non-responsive, but that didn't matter to me. I was certain he could feel my presence. As this routine continued, my husband presented me with a pager in case he needed to reach me. One evening, as I sat with my beloved uncle, holding his hand the same way I always did as a child, the machines he was hooked up to began going off. Nurses quickly ushered me out of the room. My husband then randomly texted me, paged me our secret "I love you" code. I thought he was just thinking about me. Turns out my uncle was too. The doctor came and told me they worked on my uncle for 20 minutes trying to revive him. They weren't successful. It was exactly 20 minutes earlier that my husband paged me with "I love you." It was my uncle saying goodbye. The comfort of this experience stayed with me as I grieved, and it helped me heal. It will continue to comfort me the rest of my life. Death gave me this gift, and I'm grateful. Have you ever felt you were given a sign surrounding a loved one's passing, but perhaps just shrugged it off at the time? Maybe because you had never experienced anything like it before, or because you'd never believed in that sort of thing in the first place? Well, that might have been your sign, your goodbye gift. Thank you for listening to my story. Now I'd love to hear yours. Email me at seeingthesigns@yahoo.com. That's SEEINGTHESIGNS, no spaces. Seeingthesigns@yahoo.com with the goodbye gifts you've been given. Tell me about your experience and provide me with your contact information. Granted your permission, I would love to include your story in a book I'm writing to help others find comfort and healing in their grief. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Deborah. Okay.
I'm sorry, Evan. Someone just asked if I could give that email again, that email address.
Can you put it into the group chat?
I don't know how, but I guess I'll figure that out. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, Kathleen enjoys crafting stories that are uplifting and moving. Regardless of genre, she likes to include a touch of romance, mystery, and history, with narratives that bring the characters to life. Kathleen's heartwarming stories and their settings are often inspired by experiences of people she has met or places she has lived. The inspiration of her latest novel, a cameo appearance, came after a strong summer storm felled a huge tree that left the neighbor's house unlivable. Kathleen currently lives in southeastern PA with her Springer Spaniel, Maggie. You'll find her there working on her next novel. Visit her website at Kathleen-McKee.com, which I can put up here. Go take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Mark. I have just recently published my 9th novel, which is called A Cameo Appearance. And as the bio said, the inspiration came after that strong summer storm that any of us who live in this area experienced back in June. And that led to a story about Ryan Hoffman and his young son, Sean, who had a tree fall on top of their RV when they passed through Aspen Notch, my imaginary town in Northeast Pennsylvania. And they visit Sue and Alan, who are the main characters in the Aspen Notch series, invited them to stay with them until they could get back on their feet. In the meantime, Sue's daughter and granddaughter arrived from Colorado. And they buy their mother a gift of a cameo, a rose cameo, from the new store in town called Trinkets and Treasures. And this cameo has a great deal of significance in the story, which is why I called it A Cameo Appearance. I'm going to read just a brief passage about Sue's heart being so touched by this beautiful cameo. And she's looking at it carefully one night after the others have gone to bed. After everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen island with the cameo necklace in my hand. Given my earlier conversation with Alexa, that's her daughter, the inscription on the back, "Forever my love," had so much more meaning. It was her assurance that nothing I did or said would ever break the bond we shared. The carved rose on the front also had special meaning. I never particularly liked the fragrance of roses, but the way a bud unfolded in maturity always captured my interest. The flower was distinctive and unique, while the thorns on the stem carried a warning to handle the rose carefully. For some reason, I recalled the story of The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Alexa urged me to read it to her over and over when she was a young child. No doubt, with this gift, Alexa reminded me what I often told her: we mustn't take love for granted. One sees clearly only with the heart. I wondered about the original recipient of this cameo. Was she a wife or a mother? Was it given for a special occasion, such as a birthday or anniversary? Was it treasured or forgotten over time? I'd probably never know. It was now mine, given to me by my dear daughter and granddaughter. Deep in my musings, I hardly noticed Alan arrive in the kitchen to ask if I was coming to bed. I told him that I'd be there shortly. I was thinking about roses. You don't even like roses, Alan teased. I like their symbolism, I smiled. Their aroma can often be overpowering. What does this one mean to you? Alan queried. I turned the cameo and showed Alan the engraving on its back. This necklace was meant for someone very special. I'm honored that Alexa and Jess gave it to me. I take it to mean that we shouldn't ever give up on love. What is essential is invisible to the eye. That sounds like a poem or something, Alan said before he brought his lips to mine. Let's go to bed. Good night, and thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. And I did post the link to her website there on the chat bar. Okay, next is Dorian Redburn, who has lived in Westchester and the nearby Philadelphia suburbs throughout her life. She learned that with the background of 3 college degrees, martial arts, teaching, and project managing. Now she started writing short stories. Perhaps it was living as a teenager in an old haunted house that sparked her writing, but now she is focusing on the supernatural sprinkled with crime. The first book published was a series of short short stories titled Hers and His, Stories of the Edge. Welcome, Dorian.
Hello. This is a short story, Superstition. Marie selected a pin and pushed it slowly into the head of a cloth doll. "This is for you, just for you," she whispered as she thought about the English teacher who had just graded her first composition. She glared at the orange ink D written at the top of the paper. Not only my first paper, she thought, but my first English class in the university. She read the review again, this time out loud. "This story has zero action. It's just descriptions going nowhere. Perhaps you should switch to science writing." She looked sadly as she tried to stop crying. "I will not give up. I don't care what he will say. But maybe I should take a break from writing, just for a little. It's the first story I've ever done. Maybe it's my last story." She looked at the other objects in a small, soft cloth bag. "Maybe I shouldn't have done this. Most likely it didn't work anyway. It was a souvenir from the Louisiana New Orleans store, bought for a lark." Dr. Henry C. Roy set up the table, the French roast coffee in front of him. He smiled as he selected the pens of different ink colors, green, blue, purple, orange, and red, and straightened the printed papers for the mid-year examination on each class. First, she would give an overview for each pile, putting the best writing at the top and the worst at the bottom. The best days for him were usually the worst days for other people. While most teachers avoid reviewing examinations, Dr. Henry C. Roy enjoyed grading the tests. He particularly liked to carefully turn each paper over to hide their results. As he had almost completed his overview of the first pile, a sharp pain hit his forehead, so strong he couldn't keep reading. His eyes saw colored shapes as the room began to swirl. The secretary of the English department heard a crack, like the sound of glass falling. She knocked at the door. It was quiet. She knocked again and slowly opened the door. There was Dr. Henry, laying on the table, his head down as if he was asleep. "Dr. Henry?" questioned the secretary. She walked around the table, saw the broken mug on the ground, and softly touched his shoulder. "Dr. Henry, can you hear me?" He groaned and lifted his head. "What happened?" he asked. "I'm going to call the hospital," said the secretary. "No, that's not needed. I just need to rest a bit." He looked around the table and started straightening the papers again. "Maybe it was just a migraine. I will contact the doctor." Mr. Compton, his associate professor, put his head in the door. "Are you okay?" he asked. I'm fine, he growled. "There are all new freshmen this semester. This can be more stressful for you," he offered hopefully. "Just close the door." The next 2 days, Dr. Henry was not there. An intern covered his class. Marie was worried. What if I had hurt that teacher? This should be the result of how good I write and how much I learn, regardless of how mean he was. Marie opened the small, soft bag and selected a small twist of dried herbs. She rubbed the herbs on the doll. Maybe this would help, would heal him. 2 days later, Dr. Henry walked into the front of the class, holding a stack of papers. He faced the class. This was a difficult midterm exam. In fact, there were so many low points in the exam that we agreed to curve the grade. The highest original grade was in a B, an 84. So some people ended up with over 100 because of the curve. The professor walked around talking about the problems of the exam as he gave the paper to each of the students. Marie gasped. She had a grade of 104. Later that day, Marie opened the soft bag and was going to throw away the pins and needles, but then she decided to keep it. And that's it.
Thank you, Dorian. Our next presenter is James F. Sassman, who is a novelist writing literary fiction. He is also an adjunct professor at Drexel University and a defense litigator before the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. His current work in progress is called Dempsey's Diner. Framed by Watergate, this novel chronicles the end of the hippie era in a small town, nocturnal underworld setting.
Okay.
Go ahead, James.
This is from chapter 2. In chapter 1, we follow an oil-drenched narrator, Slim. We meet his sidekick, Spitko. Now in chapter 2, we'll meet some new personalities and we'll actually step inside the diner. Saturday nights are different. No river work on Sunday means I got room to move. No matter how late, I head down to Dempsey's Diner. Before I enter, I hear the crowd, and I know that it's crazy hour at its peak. It's loud when I enter the vestibule, even louder when I open the inner diner door. When I enter the diner, I get bumped around by the crowd. Inside this swaying crowd, I case the joint, and although I don't see Spitko, I do see our friends Ham and Hank, and I wave until I get their attention. On my way to their booth, I run into Edie the waitress, who was always seen during crazy hour holding her coffee carafe above her head and yelling, "Last call for alcohol." As she passes me now, she tilts her head over to the driveway booth windows where we could see several kids standing around, waiting at the wooden fence in front of Nixon campaign headquarters. "Did the shipment come in yet, Slim?" Edie says, smiling as she turns to give a waving customer a coffee refill. When I get to Ham and Hank's booth, I see that my wheelman Spitko has joined them. Ham looks like he'll order too much. Hank looks like he'll skip dessert, while Spitko looks like he's about to sing Lil Deuce Coupe. There's music on the jukebox, but we can't make it out over the roar of the juicers. When I relay Edie's remark about the shipment, Ham says, "Everybody knows about this place." And Hank says, "It's well known." I tell them how the out-of-town Jaspers working for the EPA with me know all about the Dempsey's scene. Spitko remembers something. "Slim, I saw Ollie outside on my way in here," and I head right out to see my black lady friend. No sooner do I step outside when I hear Ollie yelling, "Stop the car! Stop the car!" And she stops somebody driving a Volkswagen, and I can see her leaning into the passenger window and talking to the driver. When the VW pulls away, Ollie sees me. We approach one another. We meet in the middle of the exit driveway, and I kiss Ollie on her cheek. "Slim, you should have seen me the other night. I got paranoid in my own bed. There's these cats that sometimes fight up top my roof. Well, I heard all this noise up there, and it sounded like a cat fight, but I didn't hear any of these cats screaming or meowing, so I thought it was narcs. I says, 'Is that cats or are you narcs? Narcs, is that you?' Oh, it was terrible. So anyway, how are you doing? I forgot to ask you that, huh?" Before I could answer, she says, "So Slim, I was riding up High Street with some people a few weeks ago, and I seen you and Colleen Burns down here. You can't miss that red hair of hers, and she was driving one of her luxury cars." "No luxury car, just her Skylark." "Well, either way, does that mean you two are back together again?" Before I could come up with the right answer, Ollie says, "I was afraid of that." She thinks for a few seconds, then asks, "Who's with you in the diner?" And when I tell her, she asks, "Does Spitko know you're madly in love with this girl?" If anybody knows, he knows, but it's not the kind of thing we talk about. "Look at me." So I look at her, and then I look over at some cars and the wooden fence until Ollie grabs me by both shoulders and pushes her glasses up on her afro and says, "And I mean keep looking at me." Once I do, Ollie holds my face between both hands and says, Colleen told you to stay away for a while because her family don't like you anymore, right? And you seen her down here that one night. You seen her since then? No. But you want to. So what's your next move? Round, get around, see if I run into her again. Okay, I understand you can't talk to Spitgo, and I know you can't talk to the other two, but if you need to talk, I want you to call me, because I know how you feel. I always knew how you felt about that chick, ever since, when was it, 3rd grade? 2nd grade. Oh my Lord, what am I going to do with you? Just then some people at the wooden fence call over to Ollie and she says, I gotta go, you call me. And this time she kisses me before jumping into some car with her people over at the wooden fence. That's it.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Jim. Okay, so our next speaker is Linda Speckles. When she was a child, her father told her that she could do anything she wanted except for a poet. She started reading at a really young age, and her parents knew they were doomed. Linda went to college at Drew University, where she majored in English and minored in psychology.
Okay.
After graduation, she managed a bookstore for several years before she decided she couldn't deal with corporate America anymore and went back to school to get certified to teach. More than 17 years later, she continues to teach, specifically instructing high school juniors and seniors. She is passionate about dance, hiking, kayaking, and travel, and counts her solo cross-country trips among her personal accomplishments. Go ahead, Miss Speckles.
Okay, so I'm going to read 2 poems and a piece of creative nonfiction. They all revolve around the notion of water. So water is sort of the central theme of all 3 of these. The first one is a poem called Dragonflies. Looking beyond the trees, my gaze traced the stream's path into the shadows, bending out of sight and into my imagination. I imagined it as a spring, burbling to the surface and then running downhill as water does, disturbing the ground in its path, a conveyor belt. My gaze returned to its starting point, where the water ended by my feet, no longer clear, no longer clean, not toxic as some streams are, but I would not sate my thirst here, where no dragonflies dared dart to and fro, their wings sparkling in the sun. My gaze moved beyond the stream to where you stood in the shadow of a passing cloud, and I understood why the dragonflies never followed you. The next poem is called Snowman. The first time I built a snowman, I cried when I saw him melt, leaving his stick arms a puddle on the ground. My father, the ecologist, explained this was the way with water. It seems to become something else as the cold winds blow in, and it falls, a white blanket transforming the world. But when the warmth returns, as it always does, the snow unveils its truth and will eventually return to the sky. As the snow falls now, and we shiver with the cold and fear of the path ahead, we hope we'll become better versions of ourselves. Maybe we will be for a moment or two, but warm winds will blow in, unveiling our truth to remind us once again that snow is just water temporarily transformed. And the third piece is, this is the creative nonfiction piece. Like most children, I dreamed of having magical powers. I imagined waving a wand, and with a simple abracadabra, I would be able to do whatever I wished. Often, the magical power I wanted to have was to make the people who annoyed me disappear. Magic meant the power to transform, whether to transform a person into nothing or to transform myself into a flying animal, or when I was older, to transform my life into so much more than it is. As an adult, I recognize that magic is earthly, connected to the things around us. One of the most transformative forces in nature is water, as anyone who has witnessed the new streams cut into the land after a deluge, or walked on the beach in the Bay of Fundy, among the rocks carved by the tide as it sculpts the coastline, or even simply noticed the way a wilted plant will reach back towards the sky after a long-awaited summer rain. Just as water is inherent in the transformation of the world around us, it seems to be part of our transformation too as we harden into adults. Granted, it is not the water inside that is shaping us, but rather the lack of it. We are fish when we are first conceived, swimming in the ocean, swimming in the water of the womb, waiting to transition to the air. Unlike the fish in the sea, we become the animals that live in the air, and yet we carry the sea within us. It is in every cell in our bodies and even in the bones, which at 31% water, we wrongly consider to be dry. That notion is even part of our language. Seems your bones are not really dry at all. Oh, sorry, part of our language. Consider the hidden water the next time you hear something being called bone dry. It seems your bones are not really dry at all, but the water is just in hiding. When a baby is born, as she leaves the inner ocean, she is 75% water, and as she ages, she gets drier and drier. When you see the image of the child, you see the shadow of what she will become. She is clay waiting for life to shape her, and life does shape her, whether through the storms that wash away her path or in the spring rains that line her world with flowers. When I have looked at baby pictures of a friend, I often stare, searching for hints that she is still the same person, that life has left behind some of who she once was. Of course, the statement, water is life, is axiomatic. And for an infant, the possibilities of that life stretch out before her with her first breath. As she breathes in and out, those possibilities change as she becomes herself with every heartbeat, as she becomes less water. And we do harden. We harden as we realize that the world is not always kind. We harden as we realize that the good guys don't always win. We harden as we learn that the beliefs that we could become anything we wanted to be was just that, a belief. Or maybe those beliefs are similar to the water in our bones, hiding in the cells. Of course, these realizations are unwanted. We never want to experience the dehydration of our lofty beliefs. And so we wish people good luck. We hope for them to find happiness. And of course, we pray for them to have sunshine on their faces. Perhaps it is better to hope for the ocean of water to continue to flow through every cell in their bodies so that they keep the inner child alive.
Thank you, Ms. Speckles. Next, will be Kathleen Takalowski, who goes by the nickname Tack, is working on a series of short stories which, when taken together, form a sort of fictional memoir. While the stories might appear to have an autobiographical tone, they depart rather significantly from what actually transpired, choosing rather to explore what might have been. This is one such story. Go ahead, Tack.
Abanico. Oh, my parents would never agree to that. I was unable to look my professor in the eye, embarrassed at being 19 years old and talking about parental permissions. I fidgeted with the notebook in my lap. As Dr. Garcia continued to enumerate the short and long-term benefits of a semester in Spain, I imagined a world in which I was not so tethered to the demands of my conservative parents. Margaret, I looked up at my professor. Consider broaching the topic with them during fall break. Here's my email in case they want to consult with a faculty member, she graciously offered. How hard it had been just to get their consent to go away to college instead of commuting from home. After many months of trying to sway them, my parents finally conceded when I promised to continue to attend church with them. Each Sunday, I got up, without waking my roommate, put on a skirt and flats, and waited at the intersection for them to pick me up. After church, we ate a meal together. I was used to the routine, but after more than a year, I sometimes wished I could sleep in or go to brunch with the girls from the dorm. I declared a major in early childhood education. However, when my professors in intermediate Spanish noted a certain linguistic acumen and encouraged me, I added a Spanish concentration. For my parents, God's call to foreign lands might be a good reason to travel far, but study and cultural experience likely were not. Now, with such an opportunity on the horizon, I could not imagine how I might persuade them to let me go abroad for a whole semester. Then came my lucky break, Uncle Mike. My father's brother was quite a bit younger and cooler than Dad, handsome in that way of people who exude confidence, self-assured without being cocky, and he was coming for a visit. I texted him privately and shared my wishes for this international opportunity. Don't worry about a thing, kiddo, was his reply. I never did hear the details of what transpired between Dad and Uncle Mike. All I knew was that now, 10 months later, I was on a plane bound for Seville, feeling a little homesick and a lot excited. Arrival and the first few weeks zipped by in a blur of orientations, getting to know my homestay family and the start of the semester. My high grades back home in courses like advanced oral skills suddenly seemed irrelevant as I tried to express myself and understand others. One day, Andrea, a tall Spanish girl with a modern asymmetrical haircut and chestnut eyes, invited me to her apartment to study and prepare for what was to be our semester-long project in current social issues. An in-class debate in which two teams of 2 people each took on an issue. The course was designed for international students and Spanish students to share their perspectives regarding topics of the day. Andrea and I sat on her bed planning our strategy for supporting autonomous states' right to secession. We compared notes and she corrected my Spanish. It was going to be a stretch for me to debate the finer points of binding and non-binding referenda of independence. I noticed that over Andrea's shoulder on the shelf above her headboard was a beautiful hand fan propped up on a stand. The intricate floral design and soft faded pastels of the abanico on what appeared to be silk suggested that it must be old, 19th century perhaps. When she saw me looking at it, Andrea told me that her great-grandmother had given it to her mother, who in turn passed it on to her. We laughed about the so-called language of the fan used by women to surreptitiously communicate their feelings under the watchful eye of chaperones. Andrea took it down from the shelf and coyly put it up to her face to cover all but her eyes. She blinked coquettishly. Quiero verte. I want to see you. She giggled. My stomach did a little flip as I caught a quick wink before she suddenly snapped the fan closed and waved it a bit. Lo estoy pensando. But what was she thinking? I had learned about the abanico the year before. It appeared in a work of literature in one of the courses required for my major. I remember liking the word, abanico. I was like that with words, especially in Spanish. 14, supermercado. The way certain sound combinations worked their way around in my mouth felt different in Spanish than in English, somehow more romantic. I don't recall the name of the story in which the vocabulary and concept of the Spanish fan appeared, but the professor thought we would be more engaged with the work if we learned some of the language associated with the fan and took turns communicating with it. Thus, I was reasonably familiar when Andrea made her gestures at me and subsequently handed me the fan, suggesting it was my turn to send a message. My hand trembled as I opened the fan halfway over my lips. Andrea smiled knowingly, and though I had invited her to do so, I was stunned when she slowly, without turning her gaze away from mine, tucked her knees underneath her, raised herself upon them, inched her face in my direction, lowered the fan away from my lips, and kissed me.
Thank you, Tack. Okay, next speaker is Donna Wilhelm. She is not an award-winning writer. In fact, the only reason she writes is so she can keep calling herself a writer. She continues to write spurred on by people she's not even related to, who tell her she should keep writing. She lives in Phoenixville with her husband, 2 sons, and a dog who thinks she's a queen. Take it away, Donna.
Donna, are you there? She seems to be signed in.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to unmute myself. Hang on. Okay. So this is called, can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. This is called New York City on the Cheap, a lesson in getting what you pay for. I'm not what you would call a planner. I can keep on top of tasks, but advanced planning is not my forte, unless it comes to vacations. I love to plan vacations, and since no one else in my family seems to care, as long as they have a decent place to land wherever we go, I happily take on this role. I'm proud to say I've gotten some pretty sweet deals on places to stay most of the time. Nice little cottages in Bar Harbor, Maine, and Chincoteague Island, Virginia, beach houses in Ocean City, New Jersey. But there have been some hiccups. Driving back from a wedding in Atlanta several years ago, we checked into a well-known motel chain in Roanoke, Virginia that I found while perusing a hotel guide at a restaurant. It was cheap and we were only going to be there for the night, so all we needed was a place that was clean and comfortable. It was dark when we arrived, and our room was located at the back of the motel complex. When we walked into the room, the musty smell immediately hit our faces. The air conditioning didn't work, and the room had an overall icky feel. "I think someone might have died in this room," our then 8-year-old said. Thankfully, the phone cord had not been cut, so we called the front desk and were immediately relocated to a better room at the front of the complex. Probably my biggest vacation accommodation gaffe, though, was the place I booked for my husband's and my 10th wedding anniversary in New York City. We had just had a baby 4 months earlier, and being short on both time and money, we decided a weekend in New York was our best bet. New York isn't known for being cheap, so I looked around on the internet for something until I came across a place on the Upper West Side that fit our price range. From the pictures online, it looked tidy and roomy. The catch was the bathroom was shared, but we'd done this before at a bed and breakfast in Maine, so although it wasn't preferred, it wasn't a deal breaker either. Leaving the kids with my in-laws, we road tripped up to New York in the pouring rain and arrived late on Friday night. After hauling our bags inside, checking in at the front desk, and riding up the world's smallest, slowest elevator, we finally arrived at our floor. I should have known from all the students milling about the lobby that this place was not going to look at all like the pictures on the internet. I turned the key to our room to find a bare space the size of a postage stamp with various electrical cords hanging on the plain white walls, a TV with crappy reception, and at the far side of the tiny room, the pièce de résistance, a set of bunk beds. If I was shocked and dismayed at the sight, it was nothing compared to the look on my husband's face. Any romantic notions that either of us held for this room were overshadowed by the two-tiered twin monstrosity before us. And for the record, he got the top bunk. Turns out this place was both a hotel and a student hostel. Feeling slightly ill, I went to find the bathroom across the hall. When I came out, my husband was standing outside waiting for me, looking at a huge, wide open 7th floor hall window with neither glass nor screen. "Well," he said, "I guess this makes it easier for people to jump after they see their rooms." There was no recourse. We did not have money to stay anywhere else, and there was no possibility of an upgrade to a better room. We went to sleep, our mood just as miserable as the relenting rain outside. The next day, we decided to suck it up and make the best of the rest of the weekend. We had fun just bopping around the city. We had breakfast at Tom's restaurant, which inspired the Suzanne Vega song Tom's Diner, and the exterior of which was used as the location for the fictional Monk's Cafe in Seinfeld. We visited the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, also known as St. John the Unfinished, because it was and still is only 2/3 completed. We waited in the rain in Times Square for half-price Broadway show tickets to see Goodnight Gracie, a one-man show starring Frank Gorshin about the on- and off-stage relationship of George Burns and Gracie Allen. Afterwards, we had a late-night dinner at Sardi's. On Sunday, we walked around the Upper West Side, past the Dakota, and hit some flea markets. In other words, we spent as little time in that hellhole of a room as possible. We took home some cool flea market buys and a story that has woven itself into our family lore and still has comedic mileage 18 years later. Through the years, we've collectively honed our list of must-haves for vacation stays: a full working kitchen, washer and dryer, cable TV, air conditioning, but never, under any circumstances ever, should there be bunk beds. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Okay. By day, Gary Zenker is a marketing strategist and copywriter, creating marketing plans and writing copy for several, for every media known and a few that have yet to be invented. By night, Gary writes flash fiction, which has been featured in a variety of anthologies, including Chicken Soup for the Soul, Laughter, published in 2020. He is also the creator of Writer's Blocks, the storytelling game and prompt generator writers for writers of all genre.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mark, for continuing this great event through COVID and through internet outages. and Evan for hosting. As I run 2 writers groups, and I'm inspired by the many writers in my groups who write in all genre. That's noir, memoir, horror, romance. So I like trying my hand and keyboard at the genre that I wouldn't normally write. Sometimes it's hard to choose between them. So thank you for hanging to the end, and I hope I make it worth your effort. This is called Crazy Love. What a great headline, she thought. To the handsome EMT in Starbucks on Sunday, save me. She loved the postings in the Craigslist misconnection listings, peering into strangers' lives. She read the words on the screen. You saw me struggling to balance my purse, my double-shot latte and berry muffin. You smiled and paid for my food, touched my hand, and talked about paying it forward. You quoted Thoreau. The language of friendship is not words, but meanings. How could you possibly have known that he's my favorite writer? For the first time, words failed me. In my head, we sat, talked, laughed, and I gave you my phone number. In reality, I only nodded and watched you walk out the door. Could we try a repeat with a different outcome? Ellen could picture it all. She imagined the EMT's wavy brown hair, smelled the mix of coffees in the air, and even tasted the foam off her upper lip. Most of all, she could feel her heart racing faster, butterflies in her stomach, and something special being reawakened inside. More than anything, she wished that had been her experience. Then her mind raced forward to what would happen if the man actually saw the posting. How would he? Maybe he would have been on Craigslist creating his own posting because the connection he had also felt. Maybe he had been in a rush, called away by an emergency to save someone's life. Maybe he had wanted to say more, but hadn't had the time. He might be looking for her too. And when they finally did connect, it would certainly be sparks. Sexual tension would fill the air. How could it not? The attention would be palpable to everyone. They would see how the two fit together like pieces of a puzzle long thought lost and finally found. Of course, there might be problems. In her fluster, perhaps she hadn't noticed the ring he was wearing, marking him as taken. But the fact that he was even looking in the missed connections was evidence that his current commitment was unstable, that he was open to something more, something better. Their chance meeting might result in, but no, it wouldn't be chance. It would be fate for both of them. They would fall hopelessly in love and live the rest of their days together. She read the ad again and then a third time. This was the most romantic thing she had ever read. She could only hope that the author and the handsome EMT would meet again and that their love would blossom. She sighed with a smile and clicked OK, which brought up a disclosure, one that only those posting a message ever see. It described the liability of the person posting such messages, disavowing any liability for responsibility of damages. She clicked OK to that as well, authorizing the system to publish her ad. Then she closed the lid of the laptop, switched off the small desk lamp, and threw a towel over her shoulder. Smiling, she walked through the dark hall back to her bedroom. She heard the loud and uneven snores of her husband before entering the room. A thin vertical line of light shining through the opening of the bathroom door shined her way. She reached into her gown and retrieved an object which reflected a bright spot on the wall. She lowered the tiny chrome iPod so that the light bouncing from it wouldn't wake him, touched the cord back to the earbuds, and placed them carefully into her ears. She chose her Killer Love Songs playlist. Then quietly, she bent over her husband, tenderly kissed him on the cheek, covered him with a sheet that he had kicked off during his sleep. Then she reached into the other gown pocket and in a single motion, raised her hand above her head and brought the kitchen carving knife down through the sheet and into her chest. He woke suddenly and struggled as she twisted the knife left to right, then right to left with all the weight her little body could manage. Even in the darkness, she could see the sheet darken as his life's blood flowed from his body. Only after his struggling ceased and the next song started, she pulled the knife out and wrapped it in the towel. Humming to the music, she made her way back to the guest room, also dark, and she fluffed her pillows. Suddenly, the enormity of what she had done sunk in. How would she explain the body? She thought of slicing the body into small pieces and throwing them out with the garbage. Too messy and honestly, too much work. The ground was far too frozen to dig a hole and bury him. She thought some more. Then she smiled and reached for the phone. Her fingers pressed the numbers 911 and she waited patiently for the voice to appear at the other end. Help, help, she half whispered, inflecting a non-existent fear into her voice. There's someone here. My husband has been stabbed. He's bleeding. Send an EMT. She rattled off her name and address and clicked the phone off. She walked to the bathroom, looking in the mirror. She applied fresh makeup and brushed her hair. Then she went to the kitchen and put out a plate of cookies, the good Pepperidge Farm ones. After all, if she was lucky, maybe they would send her new boyfriend. He might be hungry. Thank you.
Excellent, Gary. That wraps up the speaker portion of the evening.
Evan, you want to say a few words about the writers group? I know you put your email address in the chat, but
yeah, so sure. If you want to get an invite for the writers group, it's called Phoenixville Fiction Writers, rather. So go ahead and email me at that address, and I will send you an invite. Right now, we're doing all via Zoom meetings, so it'll be similar to this. You can submit 5,000 words for each meeting, which is frankly a lot. But it's twice a month, so that's 10,000 words from each member, up to twice a month. If you attend, you're expected to read everyone else who has submitted that for that session. And then what I'll send you all the details. It's held every first and third Tuesday of every month, and we submit the Tuesday that's previous to that. So yeah, what was that, Mark?
Didn't say anything.
Okay. Okay.
And you meet on Zoom.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks everyone tonight. Always astonished and impressed by the variety of writing genres that we get for our open mic night. And just a pitch for something on the library's website. We've been doing ever since the beginning of the pandemic, the Phoenixville Community COVID-19 Creativity Project. Say that 3 times fast, where we're asking for any submissions that you would like. Writing submissions, any work that you've been doing during the pandemic. If the pandemic has inspired your work, we'd like to showcase it on our website. So feel free to email it to me. You probably all have my email address by now, mpinto@ccls.org. At this time, I'd like to ask you to unmute yourselves if you'd like, and feel free to chat, ask any of the other writers questions, say hello, whatever you'd like to do.
Thank you all. That was great.
Thanks to everyone who
Yeah,
presented.
thank you. It was wonderful session, very interesting and inspiring too.
Very.
It is. It's very inspiring. Yeah.
Great stories from everyone. I enjoyed I enjoyed all the stories.
Yep. And thank you, Mark, for putting it together.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Thanks,
Love
Mark.
doing it.
Thanks,
And
Mark.
Evan for hosting. We appreciate
Evan.
your role, Evan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Jim, you're trying to say something, but you were muted.
Now I'm unmuted.
Let me see. Here you go.
You got him now.
I'm unmuted. I finally remembered why I didn't make the first Zoom meeting. I was teaching that night. It was the Monday in April. That's why I didn't make it. That's why I thought this was the first Zoom at Phoenixville. This is the second Zoom. Now
Yeah.
I get it. I had a conflict. There was no way I could get out of that conflict.
No problem. And hopefully the next time we won't have to do it on Zoom, but who knows?
Yeah.
So it's only about 6 months, Jim. No big
Yeah.
deal.
April
Eric,
2021.
Yeah, thank you for helping. It takes a lot of time to get all these people together.
Yeah, it does. And thank you all for being available.
And Mark, I just wanted to thank you again because, as I said, I wasn't even supposed to be here. So I truly appreciate the opportunity and,
Yep, you're welcome.
I so enjoyed it. Thank you.
It worked out and couldn't tell that you were nervous in the least, so.
No, not at all.
Very sweet. I don't believe you, but that's very sweet. No, thank you. Thank you.
And it's also the first time I've seen Gary Zenker without facial hair. He's actually a nice looking guy.
He looks a lot younger.
You know,
Didn't notice it when I caught him.
going somewhere. Hey, Dorian, good to see you again, dear. Jane, all my buddies, Jim, Greg, thanks for navigating that chat thing for me. It's like, who the hell can figure that shit out? You know what I'm saying? Chris, good to see you again, my man.
Yeah, good to see you.
All you guys. And those folks I haven't met, I look forward sometimes to meeting you. In the meantime, for tonight, I turn into a pumpkin in about 5 minutes.
Be careful this time of year.
Come on.
Great to hear everybody.
You're gonna watch football, Lanny. I know it.
Thank you.
Well, have a great rest of the evening to everybody, and happy coming Halloween.
Thank you. You too. And thanks for reading to us in Russian. That was fun.
And thank you guys too. They were all great readings.
Thanks a lot.
Good luck, good writing.
Thanks, you too.
Keep writing. See you next time.
Yes, keep writing, folks, please, yes.
Thanks.
All right, good night, everybody. Thanks
Have
again.
a good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Mark. Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.